students who are committed to addressing environmental issues and sustainability, from climate change to food waste to water quality. We also engage in skills building and practical action at local events, and we invite you to join us. You can find the link to learn more about us and what we do in the chat. Tonight's program, Looking Good and Being Mindful, is a dive into the issue of sustainable fashion, what it is, how the fashion industry affects the environment, and how we can make more sustainable choices. Before I introduce you to our speakers tonight, I'd like to remind everyone that this webinar is being recorded, like you just heard and had to click the button. You may drop questions in the chat or raise your hand when we reach the Q&A portion, and we will call on you. Joining us tonight are two well-accomplished experts on tonight's topic. Rachel Higgins holds a BS from Drexel University in Fashion Design and Merchandising and a Master's of Professional Studies in Business of Fashion from LAM. Rachel is an advocate for circular fashion, and after building and selling her children's clothing brand, she switched her focus to fashion education in order to make a bigger impact on creating change within the industry. Rachel currently teaches at Drexel University and Moore College of Art and Design. She is active in the Philadelphia fashion community, leading sustainability committee for the Philadelphia Fashion and Garments Task Force, and is the clothing/textile coalition leader for All Together Now PA, where she is working on building out the textile supply chain for the state of Pennsylvania. Also joining us tonight is Beth Gingold, who founded Recycle Leaders to help school staff and students take action on waste with lasting, measurable results. She and her team of high school interns are partnering with the Audubon Naturalist Society to build the world's largest action research projects for high school students. One focused on reducing household food waste and on reducing microplastic pollution from clothing. During her 5 years of leading the recycling program for DC public schools, she launched the first citywide actions challenges for schools, published the DCPS Recycles Honor Roll performance data on interactive maps, and gave input to more than 10 LEED modernization projects. She is a LEED Green Associate and holds a BA in Economics and a Master of Environmental Studies from the University of Pennsylvania. And from our advisory group, Noemi Bolaños, recently recognized for her accomplishments winning the Naturally Latino Champion Award, is joining later in the program to share her work with Recycle Leaders and share a project idea we hope to launch in Montgomery County that will reuse graduation gowns. So let's get started. Rachel, would you like to begin our program tonight?
Sure. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Can everyone see okay? So today we're going to talk about sustainable fashion and what that word even means and what it is and how you can get involved. And this is a huge, huge topic. So I just want everyone to know that we are just skimming the surface here tonight. I know Beth and I are really happy to answer any further questions. You can contact me as well. But this is a big project. It's a big deal. We all wear clothes every day. This affects every single one of us. So the first thing I want to start with is by talking about what all these words even actually mean. So you may have seen the words fast fashion or circular fashion or sustainable fashion, and they all mean very different things. So fast fashion, when we're talking about fast fashion, it means any clothing that is produced quickly, just like it sounds, fast. It's fast, it's cheap, it's on trend, it's meant to last for a short amount of time. So these are stores like H&M, Forever 21, Shein, places like that, where you can buy things that look really cool, cost very little, and are often very low quality. Fast fashion is a big, big problem because it means that somebody along the supply chain did not get paid fairly. It's a way that we are kind of like helping to support modern day slavery. So this is something that we really want to avoid. I'm going to show you in a few minutes what it looks like to make clothes and all the different steps that are involved in that. And when you see how many people are involved in making your clothing, and then you realize how inexpensive you can buy it sometimes cheaper than even like a cup of coffee, we have a big problem. That means somebody did not get treated fairly along the way, and we're damaging our environment along the way as well. Circular fashion means that we consider the end of the life of that garment. So right now, our supply chain, and supply chain means that there's all these different steps in making a product. It goes kind of like in a line. We buy materials, we make it into something, and then we don't want it anymore and we get rid of it. But that's not what we want to do. We want to create a circular supply chain or create circular fashion, meaning that once we no longer want that product anymore, there's a solution for it. There's a place for it to go besides into our landfills. So instead of taking that clothing and throwing it away when we're done, we're then able to either reuse it, repurpose it, or recycle it. And that's what we're thinking about when we're thinking about circular fashion. Now, you can't recycle clothes like you can a glass bottle. It's not exactly the same thing. There's many, many layers and it's extremely complicated. So we're very far away from this world in which circular fashion exists. However, there's a lot of good news and there's a lot of good steps that we can take to work towards this goal, which I think Beth is going to talk about a little bit later. So sustainable fashion, when we talk about sustainable fashion, is kind of like a catch-all word. It can mean a lot of different things. And it's important for everybody listening that we all identify what our own values are in respect to sustainable fashion. Sustainable fashion can mean circular fashion. It can mean that we care about water usage when our clothes are made. We can care about the dyes that our clothes are made. We can care about ethics and equality and the people who are making our clothes. We can think about the types of fibers and will they biodegrade. We can think about 1,000,001 things under this big umbrella of sustainable fashion. So sustainable fashion is not something that actually exists, because in reality, sustainability means that we're leaving the earth better than we found it. We're not doing that in the fashion industry, but we do want to get close to that. So when I'm talking about sustainable fashion, we're really just trying to inch closer and closer to that goal. And different brands will choose different values or goals around sustainable fashion because they're not going to be able to do everything. So you might see some brands saying that they are sustainable because they make low quantities of product. So that's a way a brand could be sustainable, because they're not mass producing things and they're not going to have a lot of waste at the end of that. They're hoping that they can sell and people can use everything that they have left over. You might see some brands saying that we're focusing on water and that they're cleaning trash out of the waterways. They're using environmentally friendly dyes. They're doing things to help sea life. And that's how they're approaching sustainable fashion. So there's many, many ways to think about this. Shopping secondhand is the way that you all can approach sustainable fashion by, instead of buying new, supporting things that are already in our fashion system. The goal here is to have as little impact as possible, when the fashion system in reality has a very large impact on our environment. So as I mentioned, sustainable fashion includes a lot of these different things to think about. So it includes water. Our fashion industry is extremely harmful to our waterways, especially because of the dyes used. If you have clothing that's a really dark, deep, rich color, a lot of water was used to make it that color, and a lot of water was wasted to make it that color. And unfortunately, in a lot of places where our clothing is made, like in Bangladesh or in India, they don't have the same laws that we might have locally to protect our waterways. So people are then drinking out of this water, eating out of this water, bathing in this water, and they're getting diseases. And it's really very sad and very scary. And it's a bad component about the fashion industry. We need to, again, think about chemicals, which can come from dyes, but they can also come from different finishes on your garments. So if you own something or you've seen it talked about that's like wrinkle resistant, that means that there is a chemical applied to that fabric to get it to stay wrinkle resistant. It's not good for your skin, and it's not good for our planet. Another thing which I know Beth is going to talk all about is microplastics. So microplastics are these little tiny particles. When you wash your clothing, if it's made out of synthetic materials, meaning that it's made out of like something like polyester, spandex, things like that, release these little tiny plastic particles into our waterways, which again, damage our waterways. We all end up eating a lot of plastic. Not good for you, not good for the planet. You need to think about ethical labor. So I mentioned this one already. You need to think about waste. Where is our clothing going when we don't want it anymore? And what happens to all the clothing that is made that isn't sold? It has to go somewhere. Right now, even if you donate your clothing, about 85% of it still ends up in the landfill. We right now have a global supply chain. And what happens is when you donate something, a very small percentage of it gets sold locally, gets sorted, and then most of it gets shipped overseas to other countries where they try and sell it in secondhand markets. They can't sell all of it. We have way too much clothing being produced, and it ends up in landfill overseas or ends up being incinerated. So we really have to think about, before we buy something, am I going to still have this 10 years from now? Am I still going to want to wear this? Or is this just going to end up in the garbage? Because we want to avoid that. We also need to think about our packaging. I'm sure you've all seen, if you ever shopped online before, you've probably gotten something in a plastic mailer bag, and then inside of that plastic mailer bag is probably another plastic bag. And it's in there for a reason. It's there to protect your clothing from mold or water waste or any kind of thing spilling on it. It's there to protect your clothing in transit, which does save some clothing. So it's not a complete disaster, but it still is a lot of plastic that then can't be recycled. So we have to think about all these different like labels and tags even on our clothing. You know, sometimes you get clothing with a ton of tags, all this packaging. Like, is it really necessary? Where does it go? We have to think about our carbon footprint. What's our impact we're making on the planet overall? This can include things like shipping. When we make clothes, they go all over the globe before they get to you. It makes no sense. They go all over the place, and it actually can cost less for clothes to be transported all over the place before they get to you. So this is something we want to consider. And that's why buying from local businesses that are small businesses are really important when we can. And then you have to think about the end of life. So where does that product go when we no longer want it? And there are some companies you may have seen recently that are taking this into their own hands. They're taking clothing back when you no longer want it. And that's a great step in the right direction, but we still have a long way to go. And even when companies say that they're doing that, it's important to kind of follow up and ask the question of, okay, where is it actually going? Because I can tell you H&M, for instance, does this take back collection, and it goes into this global supply chain that I just talked about, which is not the worst thing. It's one of maybe the only options we actually have available to us right now, although technology is moving in a better direction. But it's still getting sucked into this whole global cycle. And that's really not what we want. We want it to get turned back into new materials, or be able to go to somebody that can actually utilize that piece of clothing, and it's going to need it and wear it and not throw it out. So I just want to show you, I'm going to do this is a quick overview. Making clothing is a very complex process. The reason why I want to show you all these different steps in making clothing is because I want you to think about when you're only paying $5 for a shirt, all these people that were involved in making that shirt are not getting paid fairly. Somebody is suffering here along the way because there's a lot of things that need to happen. We have to design our clothing. We have to source materials, meaning we have to look for Where can we buy that button we want, or that zipper, or that fabric, or that elastic? There's a lot of components inside everything that we wear. We have to develop our line. We have to do some product development and merchandising. So I won't really get too much into what that is, but it means that we have teams of people working for these big businesses that are planning out what's going to sell the best, what should we price it for, how are we going to meet our customers' needs. And there's tons of research and time that goes into that. We need to make patterns. So every piece of if you look at your shirt, you can see where there's seams where things are maybe sewn together, like the sleeve might be sewn to the front of the shirt, maybe sewn to the back of the shirt. Each of those individual pieces, somebody has to figure out how they fit together like a big puzzle. And then once you figure out how those fit together like a big puzzle, we need to make different sizes. So if we started our puzzle pieces with a size small, we now have to figure out, what does a medium look like? What does a large look like? What does an extra large look like? What does a 2X look like? Or whatever sizes we want to include. We then have to try all those sizes on models. We have to make changes, adjustments, change the pattern again, go back, try them on again, go back to the change the pattern again, go back, try them on again. So this is a long process to get that fit just right. We also have to remember that natural fibers, so fibers that come from the earth, not from a lab, need to be planted and grown and harvested and processed. So if you have something that's cotton or that's linen or even material made of hemp, all of those materials started from the earth. There's a whole farming community of people that has to be involved in that process. Then we have to turn those fibers that we picked from the ground into fabric. And in order to do that, we have to turn it into yarn. We have to weave it or knit it into fabric. We have to then dye it. Or if we want to print on something, we need to print it. We need to cut the fabric, then we need to sew it together. Then we have to ship it to our warehouse and ship it to the customer. Then maybe their customer is a store that's shipping it to another customer. And then we have to figure out, where does it go when we're done with it? So this is the scaled down version of all the different people that are involved. So you can just imagine how many more people there might be. And in big companies, especially, there are hundreds of people that do each of these different jobs. It's not just one person doing each thing. There's a lot of people involved here that need to be paid fairly. So I know one of the questions that you all had was kind of, what happens with our clothing donations and where do they go? So typically what we do with our clothing when we no longer want it is we think, oh, we're going to donate it to Goodwill or Salvation Army and it's going to go to someone who needs it. And as I mentioned before, that's not really the case. And this picture on the left, I think this is from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. This picture is where I originally got it. But you can see this scale and the magnitude of these piles of clothing that are getting shipped to other places in the world, and animals are like living on these mounds of clothing and eating it. And it's really sad to see. So instead, what I would really urge you to do is learn some basic sewing skills. So mend your clothing, sew up a hole, sew on a button, fix a zipper. Most people, that's why they get rid of something, is because it's just a tiny little tear or something small that can easily be fixed. So instead of donating, we want to try and mend things whenever possible. We want to rehome our clothing. So donating directly to a person that's going to use it, finding a shelter in your area that needs clothing specifically, and trying to keep that clothing in your local system for as long as possible instead of just blindly kind of donating it and sticking it in a donation bin. We can also sell our items secondhand. So I know some of you probably use like ThreadUp or Poshmark or things like that. That's a great way to rehome your waste, and you can make some money doing it. And that's a great place to shop also. And I believe that's the most sustainable way to shop, is to shop secondhand. You can get almost brand new things for less money and great quality, and you're not kind of contributing to this whole system. You're helping to clean it up. And when you do buy something new, you want to think about, am I going to have this for a long time? Is the quality going to last me a long time? And you'd be surprised if you save your money, instead of buying 10 t-shirts that cost $5, maybe you can buy a couple that are really well made that you're going to have for years to come. So it's just a different way about thinking. And I know that Beth is going to kind of touch on more of this later. So that was a very, very quick overview with a lot of information. I don't know if we want to take questions now, or if not, I will hand it over to Beth.
If anybody has like one or two like quick questions, we can take them now. But other than that, we can go to Beth next if there's no pressing questions right now. What's the hanger trick is one.
Oh, what's the hanger trick?
Yeah.
Oh, is Beth going to share about that? I can talk about that too.
No, you go.
Okay. So the hanger, are you talking about when you flip your hangers in your closet? That we're talking about, I think. So it's a good way to test what you're actually wearing in your own wardrobe. So if you look at everything in your closet and you flip all the hangers, so that you normally hang things in your closet so they're kind of hanging this way so you can take them off. But instead you hang the hanger this way and see what you actually wear. And at the end of this season, you'll be able to see all the hangers that are still hanging this way. You don't wear those items, but the hangers that you turned around, you wore those items. So everything that's left over, it's time for you to reevaluate and think about, do I need this? Do I not need this? Where can I donate this to responsibly? And do I need to replace it? Because maybe you don't, because you didn't wear it at all. So maybe you were really fine with a lot less than you thought.
That's really handy. I like that. I'm gonna try it.
Yeah, try it out.
Right. Beth, if you want to go ahead and do your section of the presentation, that'd be great.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Good.
and you
Okay.
can see your presentation.
Awesome. Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here with the saplings, and which I've been having so much fun learning about because we share our intern, Noemi. So I love how you're bringing together high school students across the country, and how, the county, and how you're really supporting this. So thanks, Laura. Thanks, our moderator, for keeping us in line. And I'm really also excited to be here with Rachel, because she's such she brings such expertise on this particular issue. So I thought I would start with this question, and I guess if you can share thoughts in the chat, since I wasn't sure whether I'd be able to see you or not. But this question of, why are you wearing that? Whatever you're wearing right now, like, why are you wearing that? And I don't mean this in the sense of like how your mother says it when you walk out the door, right? Just like in a curious way, like, why did you decide to wear what you're wearing? If anyone wants to share, I would love to hear it in the chat. For me, I said, well, I'm going to be presenting at a sustainable fashion webinar. So I thought maybe I should wear something that looks a little fun and interesting, but kind of professional. So you guys can let me know whether I succeeded in being appropriate for this event. But yeah, comfy and practical, jeans and a flannel shirt. Does anyone else want to share? Thank you, thank you. My mom would be proud, yes. Weather appropriate, yep. Headbands to keep your hair out of your face, right? Because you're presenting too, right? You're moderating, this is being recorded. So if anyone else wants to keep sharing, some things that we thought of when we were making this presentation is, we wear outfits for many reasons. Yeah, maybe professional, right? We want to project a certain thing to other people. You mentioned weather. So a lot of what I buy is, performance wear. I like to go hiking. So I'm thinking about, how is this going to work in different climates for different activities. For athletics, actually, that's also very, people make choices based on performance and gear and things. Of course, they get you to, like with the gear, right? But also sometimes it's just to, either to blend in. So apparently my my mom and my brother once pointed out to me, I think around high school or college, that so much of what I owned was just gray t-shirts. There were like swimming t-shirts that I got at swim meets, and that's kind of just what I would wear often that I didn't notice. But it was kind of like, okay, this is a thing that helps you blend in and kind of isn't too edgy. But sometimes you want to stand out, right? Like sometimes you want people to notice you. So people wear things for all sorts of reasons. But this is also something Rachel touched on, is thinking about, is what I'm wearing projecting my values? And could be, is it projecting it to other people? But it could also be, is it making me feel good that what I'm wearing is consistent with what I care about? And so for Erin, one of our other interns, Erin Peterson at Northwest High School, she actually leads our social media and also the Make the Most of Food challenge, which is focused on, it's the #1 global solution to climate change, reducing food waste. So I know some of you who really work on climate, you might have this burning question every time you look at your clothes. Does this make my carbon footprint look big? And for me, because I work on plastics, that's something that I think a lot about. So actually, when I used to run the recycling program for DC Public Schools, I created these 4-week action challenges for DC schools to do together. And one of them was a food waste one, and one of them was a single-use plastics one. And so at about that time, I actually got this is one of my favorite t-shirts, which was the Earth Day shirt that year, which I loved. And it actually is made out of 100% recycled polyester. And it says on the back, made from 8 plastic bottles. So like when I got this shirt, I thought that was cool because it's a way of, using recycled materials to, usually we like using recycled materials. And also there are now companies, pulling plastics out of the ocean and using that to make fabric. So I'd also like to ask you, does anybody know what they're wearing in terms of what's on their clothing tag? If you know and like to share. It's also, whether you have your camera on or off. I happen to know that this outfit is 100% cotton. Because it was made in India. I bought it there, lycra, some mix of lycra and cotton. So sometimes I like to do the activity of just asking everyone of, a lot of people, it's often a mix of cotton and polyester. So I was learning about this, and I was an expert on how to do outreach on plastic education. And that's how I got invited to a panel on microplastics, actually. So in my head, microplastics were like, if you have a plastic bottle and it breaks down in the water, that's, just smaller pieces of plastic. And what I learned on the panel that I was presenting at with actual experts on microplastics specifically. So this is Dr. Jessie Myler. She's also involved with the Clean Headwaters program that Montgomery Green runs for high school students, is one of the leading, probably the leading expert in the Chesapeake Bay watershed on microplastics. And what I learned from her is that about 60% of the microplastics that they were finding in waterways, local waterways, was actually microfibers from clothing. And that was actually the first time that I was introduced to it, even though I'd actually, for years been working on plastics and water pollution. And that really struck me because it means that I'm working at school, this is not an issue that is kind of mainstream yet. And that people, I didn't know about it. So, it hasn't quite made it. So I said, well, Jessie, what if we do, what could we do a challenge on that? And that's where we came up with the idea of the Everywhere Counts challenge, which is a 4-week challenge where we measure how much plastic laundry we produce in a week. And we discuss things that we might be able to do about it. And it's a little wonky, but the way we came up with it was with our interns. So it's actually a partnership also with Audubon Naturalist Society. But we had one of our recycle leaders interns. She was a Wakefield High School, actually Arlington Public School student, who helped kind of design. We came up with a test methodology, and then we worked with Ruki from Montgomery, who was one of the Clean Headwaters students, to like beta test this methodology, because nobody's done it before. We're like, I don't know, what do we track? What is it that we can do in 4 weeks that we can measure something and then take action and actually have it be like enough meaningful that you can make a change in that limited amount of time? So last summer, we successfully had the first class, and for Plastic Free July, we learned that on average, or they're about, we generated about 9 items of plastic laundry a week, and we shared ideas about what we could do for reducing microplastic pollution. But the bigger thing that comes out of this, because you can, especially when I tell this to adults, they're like, well, Beth, what can you do? Like, what do they come up with? How can they possibly change anything in that amount of time? Which is true, but it's a long-term thing, because what comes out of it is students who get interested in doing more. So we had one of our Clean Headwaters students, she decided, Genevieve did her senior project on microplastics. I'm working with Gracie now. She's doing independent research on PPE litter and just kind of quantifying that. And then we have Noemi. Noemi, do you want to share a little bit about what you're doing now?
Yeah, so I guess after doing the Everywhere Counts challenge, it really just opened my eyes to the bigger problem in question, which was not just plastics pollution, but microplastics pollution. And so, I mean, I was motivated to do a whole bunch of other things, but it really just led me to recycle leaders and just getting more involved with this challenge in general, and just as well as the Make the Most of Food challenge. And I was just really inspired by it. And so some of the things that I did after the challenge was, I started to focus more on the little things that actually, made a difference. We're told that, you have to make a big mark on the world in order to be noticed. But in reality, it's these little individual actions that really start to change your impact on the world. And so some of the things that I did was just like washing my laundry in cold water. That's something that I'm not sure if many of you do, but it actually does make a really big difference. And by making that a habit, I'm sure that the amount of microplastics that my clothes is shedding is definitely being reduced. And then, through my internship here, now I get to work with Beth on the Everywhere Counts challenge. We kind of beta test the challenge often, and so we kind of look at how things are translating in a way, and if things need to be updated to make it so we can inspire more students, and hopefully we can start to create more stories out of this and invite more students to get involved with this challenge. So that's a little bit about me and Everywhere Counts.
Thanks, Noemi. So I just thought I would close. Oh, and I saw Rachel's comment on what's in our clothes as like a health issue. That's also a whole other interesting thing to think about. Yeah, I see you started a conversation about that in the chat. But I just wanted to close on, so when I started doing this challenge, it made me think, okay, well, what things should I do in my life now to try to be more in line with being a person who's running the Everywhere Counts challenge? And so I wanted to share a real example of how I decided to buy jeans. And I realized that everyone has different ideas about how they make decisions about buying something. I buy jeans when they wear out, when there's a big hole in them, and I wear them for work. So I do have jeans that are mended, but I need to have them be appropriate for work. And also Because I really wear them out, I typically do buy them new because it's, I'm wanting to have them for a long time. I kind of hate the process of shopping. So it's like, it's also a benefit to me to be able to, to buy new. But so what for me work is like, especially when I was, now going out to schools, it's like, well, I need something that looks presentable and that I could be doing a waste audit in at a school, but the mayor might stop by, right? So it's kind of like, I need to be functional and look kind of like presentable at the same time, but it's not really a fashion statement, right? It's not really something that's interesting or fun. So the first criteria for me was really performance, right? It was, how does this function as my, workplace wear out jeans? But because I was, starting this whole microplastics thing, the next one was looking at the materials and could I find something that was 100% natural fibers. So I actually asked Ruki to help me. I was like, Ruki, can we look into like what could I do with 100% cotton? And we did find some very, very cool jeans made out of natural fibers, but they were all outside of the price range that I would normally, even for myself. And also, since I work with high school students, I want to make sure that like affordability is a criteria, because when I'm using examples that I would like them to be relatable. So at the same time, I was like, well, that's going to be limiting for all of the reasons that, Rachel brought up. But what if I try to find a brand? I need a brand that's at least doing something. So I went to the Ellen MacArthur Jeans Redesign website, which is like, it's an industry initiative that they even say themselves is kind of like setting a low bar for getting brands on board to starting to do things. But I said, okay, I want to do a brand, at least that's doing that, that has made some commitments to sustainability. And then finally, I wanted one that was easy to get to for me. I don't like buying clothes online and trying them on and sending them back and all those things. And I don't like the process. I also don't have a car, needs to be public transportation accessible. So I ended up buying a pair of Levi's jeans at Wheaton Mall. So that's what I did. It's actually only 60% cotton, but they were very heavily marketing durability and sustainability. Like when you walked around the mall, they were one of the only brands in that section that actually were marketing themselves that way. So I'm not claiming this is, there's many ways to make these decisions. This is how I made mine. And I just kind of wanted to leave you with this question of, what would you do? Like, how do you make these decisions when there's so many different kind of variables to consider? So, and now then I'll catch up with the chat of all of these things we can relate to each other. Yeah.
I just wanted to add in there, Beth, with the jeans, because I think denim is a hard one. And I saw someone just put in the chat, it's hard to find 100% cotton, like socks or underwear or things like that. And that's absolutely true. And there are reasons for that. 100% cotton jeans are not going to be as comfortable as jeans with spandex that have a stretch to them. It's going to feel very different than what you're used to. So just a warning, if you choose to go down that route, we got into this pickle we're in because for a reason, right? We ended up here because that's sometimes what's most comfortable or most affordable or other different things. So we do need to, that's such a great point that Beth made, right? That we have to kind of like think about these things as we make these different decisions.
Oh, and I forgot to make my plug where if you're interested in getting updated on the Everywhere Counts Challenge, this will send you there, and it's running it again in plastic-free July. But to also piggyback on that, how we got there as a swimmer, what I realized after doing this project is that, I went to the beach and I'm wearing a bathing suit. And you know how many bathing suits I wore out by swimming in water? And you know what they're made out of? Plastic. So that's going to be a challenge. So
Thank you so much, Beth. Really appreciate all the information. And Rachel, you guys did a great job. Now we're opening up to questions. So you guys can type in the chat if you have any specific questions, or unmute if you're comfortable. I know we've had a lot of good conversation in the chat. I've been following along as presentations are going. I have one question. Either Beth or Rachel could answer this. What do you think is the most challenging part of trying to encourage people to make sustainable fashion choices?
I think the hardest thing is that it's overwhelming. I think that people get stuck on this idea of like perfection, and that doesn't exist. So something is better than nothing. And it's hard to change our behaviors and our habits. And even the most well-seasoned professionals in this industry still see that really great shirt that they just can't live without and might want to buy it. And it takes a lot of thinking and retraining and reconditioning of our brains in order to make those habit switches. So it's not just about like the idea of wanting to do better. It's about how can you create those habits in your life. And that goes everything, you know, not just clothing. When you're trying something new, like even if you're trying to like eat healthier or trying to exercise more, right? We have to build up to that. So I think just picking what you really care about, that's like I talked about the different ways to kind of think about sustainability. Pick one or two of those things that you really care about and just stick with that. And then once you get that down, you can kind of go to the next one. I know for me, when I first started this journey, the thing that I did first is that I looked for things that were made in USA, and I didn't buy anything that was made anywhere else. And that really helped me to curb my shopping patterns and just start to look at the labels and start to think about things. So just think about the thing that's like the most important thing to you. And it doesn't have to be the most important thing to your friend or to your cousin or your sister. Just like, what do you care about, and start there.
Yeah, I actually really like that strategy. I think one of the choices that I've made is trying to shop locally and shop like usually only like thrift stores, because now that like among a bunch of my friends, like younger generation, thrifting is like a new cool thing. And like it's really like it's a good thing that it's cool now, because it's like a very great option to be sustainable with your fashion choices. So that's one of my things that I've been doing. I'm trying to keep up with the chat. There's so much going on. Laura, did you have a question?
I did. I wanted to ask, actually I have two questions, but I'm going to stick with one right for now. I wanted to ask Rachel or Beth what they thought about how clothing should be priced, what we should be thinking about paying, what would be an appropriate price to pay for a pair of jeans, let's say, if everybody in the production process was being paid fairly.
That, do you want me to take that one back?
Yeah,
absolutely not.
I'm
Yeah,
frightened
so
that you're going to say
it's a loaded
$200.
question, because it really a big cost of making clothing also is the material quality and what that materiality is. So we can't kind of look at this in a vacuum. But I will tell you, for a t-shirt, I would say an appropriate amount of money to pay for a t-shirt is probably between $30 and $50.
Wow.
That's like what it actually costs to have like natural fibers, and everyone paid fairly along the way.
Right.
Jeans,
Well, oh, go ahead.
sorry, jeans are hard to make. If you look at your pair of jeans, there's pockets, there's grommets, I'm like looking at mine right now. There's all these different types of stitching. There's extra stitching on the pockets because they're there for durability. Like jeans are actually a very technical garment. And so they should be more expensive.
Right. Well, and the reason why that's such a loaded question also is that people should be able to afford things. So you have to kind of weigh the idea that there are people with varying levels of ability to pay, and
Right.
that's what makes it hard. But it's also, there are people who are, you know, buying a lot of fast fashion that if instead said, okay, well, instead of buying fast fashion, right, I'm going to buy like one nice thing that lasts a long time, then, you know, and then that one thing that you buy might actually be less than all these other different purchases. So, the other reason why that's a very complicated question, though, is that people in different countries get the idea that price is the same for everyone is very not true. So there's also, you know, a lot of what goes into the price is actually the marketing paid for, you know, at the end to the people who are doing the high like marketing type jobs and not getting to, you know, the factory garment worker in wherever they are, who actually, if you paid them, you know, like they don't, if you paid them a little bit more versus the marketing, it would make a bigger difference in their lives. So anyway, we could talk about this forever. I actually would love to get more into that with Rachel about
Yes, we could
what
have a
things
whole
really
discussion.
cost. Yeah.
And
And
I
I
do
could talk
just-
about the externalities of the pollution. I mean,
this is very loaded. I do just want to
Yeah.
add though too, that is a big problem with sustainable fashion is it's not accessible to everyone. But the biggest way to be sustainable is to not buy new. So I just want everyone to think about that. And if you're buying secondhand, that is very affordable for most people. That's the best way you can be sustainable is to buy things that already exist and keep what you already have and where you already have longer. It's not buying new things. Like that's not what is getting us out of this. But if you are buying new things, it is important to really look into the brands that you're supporting and support those smaller brands that have real sustainable initiatives that are not greenwashing you. We didn't talk about greenwashing. I just realized, just want to quickly touch on greenwashing is when companies are marketing to you to pretend they're sustainable and they're actually not. And this happens all the time. So it's important as a consumer that you look into those companies. You don't just believe what they're saying for face value. And that's hard. There's a lot of responsibility on the customer right now too, which is another issue we could talk all about.
right. But the other thing to just push it a little bit further is this gets me back to like when people market like luxury environmental. So fashion itself, so there's a difference between clothing and fashion, right? And a lot of what fashion is there's a positive of I'm expressing myself, I'm being, you know, unique and special. And there's the negatives of I'm creating something exclusive. Like we're purposely creating an exclusive thing that most people won't have access to, right? So there's kind of that inherent, that's like a whole other conversation about, you know, what does it mean to be like in the fashion industry? Because you can say the fast fashion people are the problem. At the same time, you know, they're providing things to like most people. They're getting kind of the trickle down trends from the people who are making their money off of being the most exclusive things for, you know, the smallest number of luxury people who can afford the most. So just, it's another thing to think about.
I think Noemi wanted to ask a question or have you guys give some advice on what we're trying to do with our graduation gowns. Do you want to talk about that for a little bit?
Yeah, I'd love to. So I guess I wanted to ask a little bit of advice on how we can make this graduation gown drive project more sustainable. But before you give a little bit of advice on that, I wanted to give you a little debrief of what that is. So what we want to do is create this project that students can pilot in their high schools, because we recognize that graduation gowns are not only just an economic burden on a lot of people. I mean, they can range from $20 to $200. It's really just a lot for just a 2-hour, graduation ceremony. But also it's an environmental issue, because a lot of people either just have that graduation gown sit in their closets for 5 years, or and then they'll have to just donate it to a thrift store, or maybe they'll throw it away. And where's that going to end up? It's going to end up in the landfill. And the thing is that these gowns, as we know, they're made out of polyester, they're heavily dyed, which means they have tons of chemicals. And so when they're sitting in those landfills, they're going to release those chemicals, and they're going to take a really long time to degrade. So we kind of wanted to have a project that Saplings could help students, make it a part of their high schools, where students will be able to collect the graduation gowns after the graduation ceremonies through doing like a sort of drive. And then what they'll be able to have is they'll store those gowns in a closet for like a year, and then people will be able to rent them out for cheaper prices and potentially for free if the school even allows it. But that way, these gowns can actually be recycled and not have to be bought new from the warehouses, which is what every single high school is pretty much doing right now. And so if you have any advice on how we can make it more sustainable, or how we can improve it so that way we can get the message across, or any commentary basically, it would be just really helpful. And as well as maybe that'll inspire somebody here on the webinar today to get involved in this, because we really think it's an effort that can really not just like lower the carbon footprint of the schools, but of just ourselves in general. So yeah, feel free to pitch in.
Yeah, and go ahead, Beth.
Well, it sounds like a great idea.
Yeah.
So, that's my main input, and your instincts are good, and you're fully capable of figuring it out. That's, but yeah, it sounds like a great idea. At the same time, you're going to find like barriers to it, because it's not what people are already doing. So it doesn't mean, and that never doesn't means it's not a good idea. It just means that, oh, we've never done it before. And particularly when you're like adults in your school are overwhelmed with, the end of the year, they're overwhelmed with many things right now, and it won't be their top priority, but it doesn't mean that you can't. So when something's not someone's top priority, it doesn't mean they're against it, but it means that they might not help you very much. So you might need to kind of find ways to make it seem easy to the people in charge, which means you and your other students doing a lot of work to make it something that makes sense, which it does, definitely does. And I think Rachel knows a lot more about the logistics of this type of project, but just from working with like school administrations to trying to get them to do things, it's like, how does this make them look good? So find ways to make adults look good by doing it. And that's what school leadership cares about. And make it easy. So something that's not going to cause a problem. And if you can do those two things, which you can, but it might not happen the first time too. Like you'll find when you do it the first time, you'll have like glitches and things, but that doesn't mean it's not a good idea. It just means you have to learn by trying it out, so.
Yeah, this is such a fabulous idea. I'm so excited that you guys are tackling this, because it's such an easy lift, as we say. Like it actually is not that difficult to do and has big impact. And those are the things when what Beth is talking about, when all the adults are all overwhelmed with things going on that they already have things committed to, they want something that's an easy lift and that makes a big impact. So I think that this is great what you guys want to do. Just a couple of logistical things to think about is, how are you going to collect them? So like, do you need bins? Do you need to hang them? Can you fold them and put them in boxes? Do you need to launder them at all? Like maybe yes, maybe no. People are wearing this over their clothes for a couple of hours. So like you might not need to wash them, but if it's like a rainy, muddy day at graduation, you might need to. So thinking about just, if that were to arise, what would that look like? when sorting them once you get them. It's been a long time since I bought a graduation gown, so I don't remember if they come in different sizes or what that looks like, but just think about like, do you need, I think, I probably don't do this anymore, but when I was in high school, I think the girls were one color and the boys were another color. So that's probably like unheard of these days, I'm sure. But so like that would be something that you would need to consider, like what colors are for what, or like, you know, people had different, I don't remember the things, like the ropes, whatever they're called. So like, do you want to also collect those or pins, or do those mean something different? So think about like just all of those items, where you're going to get boxes from, where's the storage space. You want to make sure that the storage space is not going to get like mildewy or things like that. Like these are just things that we need to think about. And then you need to think about how you're going to educate your fellow students on participating in this. So what kind of signage might you need around the school? Like maybe you can make an announcement over the loudspeaker a couple of times leading into graduation. I don't know, you guys all use social media all the time. Like, can you make a post that everybody can share? Like, how are you going to get people involved and make it easy for them? I think that was so important what Beth said, is you have to make stuff really easy for people. So there has to be a clear, like, here's the drop-off bin. After graduation, we'll be here for 1 hour. You can drop off your thing. If you forget, you can come the next day between these hours. And it's like very clear and very specific, so that they can drop it off. And then who's your team at the other end that's going to fold everything, package everything, put it away for next year.
And I just saw in the chat that you got shut down by your admin. So I'd love to talk to you, you know, have this discussion. I'd be happy to talk after. But another thing to think about is, who is the best messenger for whatever you're trying to say? And, you know, a lot of time we want to send our own messages and, you know, think we're our best own message. But actually, when you're trying to change an organization or get a lot of different people to participate, it might take multiple other people who can talk to different people in like a different way than you can. So for example, if you're trying to influence the administration, if you kind of, if you know what administrator might be on your side already, you know, like sometimes there's an assistant principal, or sometimes if it's a thing where they think it's going to be a problem with facilities, which this one doesn't seem as much, but like with composting or something, like if you can get the custodial, you know, the head custodian on board first and then have them talk, you know, that's a thing. And thinking about trying to get all the students to do it, it's like, well, you know, are there particular students that are already seen as leaders in the school that you think you might be able to kind of, you know, get on your side? So I don't know if sometimes sustainability people like talk to the other sustainability people, which is great. You know, we need to talk to each other and have our base. At the same time, sometimes, you know, I don't know, the head of student government or something might be willing to share your message if they're asked to do it. And if, you know, if you can get them on board, maybe it kind of, or, you know, or you maybe need a couple people who have different like audiences. So just something to think about when you're trying to change behavior of like a lot of people at the same time. But like one of the people in the chat said, graduation would be such a great time to do something like this because it's this really important event, right? So, you know, you could also, one thing is just getting the gowns and doing it, but another thing is the messaging around why you're doing it, which will get people, I mean, it was kind of like me at that, at the seminar, right? Like I didn't know that this was even a thing. So it's like introducing people to the problem. I think that you've got a really great idea, even though it might not happen this year. we can talk about that.
And I do want to add too, sometimes a lot of with schools, especially, I mean, I work mostly with colleges, but one of the things that we often have to just do is like, we will make a waiver because everybody's worried about being sued about something. So like we're organizing some different clothing drops right now with some different schools in the area, and they have 2 waivers to sign. When you donate your item, you have to sign a waiver saying that you're donating it, that I don't know what else is even on it. I haven't seen them yet, but And then when you buy the item, you have to say that I know this item was not laundered. I cannot return it. I am buying it anyway. So it's important to ask, like, if you're getting shut down by somebody, don't just like take a no and walk away. It's important to ask, like, what are your blocks here? What are the barriers that I could possibly address? Because sometimes it is as simple as just saying, like, do we just need to create a waiver for?
Yeah. And there's always a reason. I mean, they don't shut things down just because, you know, they have some reason why, but it, you know, it might be a reason that's easy to address if you know how. But it, yeah,
have, like,
trying to
3
understand,
months.
like, what is the reason?
You have like 3 months to make this happen for graduation. I think you got to go bug some more people.
No, yeah. I mean, like, basically, I was just like, because I'm vice president, like, I'm school-wide vice president. So I brought it up in our SGA class, and I was like, I really think this is a good idea. And our sponsor was like, that's a great idea. It's not happening this year, though. You would have to convince admin, you'd have to convince the company that we already bought all of the graduation gowns from to either let us like collect them and not have to rebuy from them this year. Like, there's like a whole, like, we're like working with them, and then the problems that you guys mentioned of like storing them and washing them, but all that stuff. And they were like, yeah, it's not really plausible for this year. I was like, but we're gonna make it happen at some point.
Yeah,
So
I mean, I didn't get necessarily shut down. I was close to getting it, you know, become a thing, at least getting a flyer distributed. But, you know, with what you were saying, Beth, that people are just really, they have a lot on their plate right now.
Right.
And despite the fact that I've gone back multiple, you know, times, and I've emailed multiple times, I get no response, or I can't find the person again. And so it's hard, but I really appreciate all your advice.
Yes, it's
And I'm going to
very,
take,
very helpful.
I'm a junior, so I can try for next year.
There you
I
go.
was
Do
gonna
it.
say, this is
Do
your
it.
learning year. And actually, I mean, another important thing to remember is that you've never done this before, right? And you're learning, and they've never done it before. So they're afraid to do it because it's something they've never done before. And it took me a year as, you know, schools conservation coordinator to like be able to really tell people how to do the recycling program. So it's, you know, finding out the barriers is also a very useful process. So even if it doesn't happen this year, trying to do it and trying to understand like what is the barriers is still super valuable for next year.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just presumably people will graduate again next year.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, thank you guys for so appreciative of you guys coming and speaking to us today. We thank you for sharing your expertise and giving us ideas on how to increase our own sustainability. I'd also like to thank all the participants. We had some great conversations in the chat. This has like been one of the most active chats that we've had, at least if I've been in. If you'd like to be kept up to date on Saplings programs, please let us know. I think Naomi dropped some of our information in the chat already. We will not be holding a student forum in April, but we will be at the Green Fest on Saturday, April 23rd at Brookside Gardens, and we hope to see you there. Finally, I'd like to thank One Montgomery Green, our sponsor and supporter, for making Saplings programs possible. One Montgomery Green is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to increase the sustainability of Montgomery County businesses, government, and residents. So we're very thankful for them to allow us to have this opportunity to meet and share our great sustainability ideas. So that's pretty much it for tonight. Again, thanks again to Beth and Rachel, really appreciate it. And to everyone in the chat who is participating, we really appreciate that as well. So I want to wish everyone a good night. Laura, if you want to say anything to wrap us up as well.
Thanks to our speakers. Great job. Thank you, Ariana, for moderating tonight. We're going to lose her to graduation so soon. Thanks to Noemi for being with us tonight, and everyone have a great evening. We will stay in touch with you as this project progresses, and we'll let you know how things are going. Good night, everybody.